Hello everyone and welcome to this evening's stream. Tonight we're going to take one of the Puppet modules I've got that extends Puppet lint. I'm going to run the Ruby gem called rubocop over it. Now rubocop is a static linter that will look through your code and try and find things that look slightly wrong, things that aren't idiomatic Ruby, or places where you can improve the clarity of the code. So let's begin. So first of all, we're going to clone down the repository from Git. And once we have the code down, we'll change it into a directory so we know we're working. And then I use something called RBM, which lets me run multiple versions of Ruby together. And this gem here is normally run and tested under Ruby 2.5.0. So we'll set that now. So Ruby RBM local 2.5.0. And then we'll install all the dependencies, which in Ruby's language are called gems, to the local system. So first of all, we'll do bundle exec rate spec, which will actually run the unit test for this code. And we currently have working code. Actually, that output's a little bit boring, so let's change that to be spec format documentation. And then when we run the tests, we'll get slightly more information out. So before we go any further, I'm going to make a new branch in Git. So git checkout branch rubocop fixes. And we'll put all the code changes we're making to this. So first of all, we'll git add.rspec -v, and we can see the changes we've made in the file there, which is format documentation, add master output. Okay, that's our first change, and we can see there that we're actually on the Rubo fixes branch. So now we've got that, let's actually run rubocop. So bundle exec rubocop. And this will run the rubocop binary in the environment built by Bundler, which includes the gems we just installed with bundle install. So when we run that, we have 22 offences, which is quite a few to start with. But okay, so we're running an older version of rubocop in the gem file for this. So if we go into the gem spec for this code, put in that, and we change the version of rubocop. No, that is correct. That's 0.88. Sorry, that's. I was expecting to see errors that aren't appearing in there. Okay, that's fine. So looking at the rubocop output, we see a number of different things to fix. You'll see each file name, the line of errors or the issues detected on, and the character that the issue starts from in the line. So the first one we've got is the frozen style literal comment. So this is something that's preparing your Ruby code for Ruby 3. Most things run on the Ruby 2 at the moment. So rather than fix that, I'm going to create a custom local config file, config, and I'm going to add style frozen string literal comment, and we're going to set that to be enabled false. And what this will do is when we run rubocop, it will no longer warn us about the contents of this, because I'm running on Ruby 2. I'm not going to be upgrading to Ruby 3 for quite a while. It doesn't even exist yet. So let's just suppress those warnings. And we now have less offences detected. We've gone down to 16. And now we see the error I was expecting to see before, where the rules rubocop uses are called cops. And if you've got configs that are custom tuned, the addition of a new cop can cause a lot of issues if you haven't prepared for it. So in newer versions of rubocop, you only get shown new violations if you have an option called all cops enable new. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn all these new things here on. And the way to do that is to go back into our custom config file, so rubocop, and we're going to add all cops, new cops, enable. So if you ever hit one of these, you're not sure how to configure or what options are available to suppress or change the settings slightly, Googling the error message is a pretty common way of doing it. Everyone hits the same problems all the time, so it's pretty well documented. So we're down to 16 offences, and we're no longer getting the error message at the start. So let's approach our first file, which is the template spec file. So in here we've got here doc naming as the main problem, and that's quite a fair one. So we currently use a here doc, which is basically a multi-line string there, and we use EOS to say end of string. That's not the most descriptive of things, so instead of calling EOS, we'll change that to be test underscore class, and then the code block is now indicated by test class. Should make it slightly nicer for everyone else to read. So if we rerun rubocop, we'll see that a number of offences have dropped down again. And if we rerun our specs just to make sure everything's still working, that's all still working. So git status, which I shortened to git st normally, and we have the plugin we've got. So we'll add the rubocop default config, and we'll also add the file that we just made the changes to. Git add. So we'll add those to our commit, and then we'll commit the changes we've just made. Add principal defaults. Principal defaults. And correct. You've got that. So this is an example of how to do things badly, because this is my own code base and not production one. If you ever find yourself adding an AND in the top line of a commit, you probably group two things together rather than actually separate them out into separate commits. But as it's a weekend and I just want to get this done before I go to bed, I'm quite happy to be a little bit fudgy on the commits. So we'll rerun rubocop, and hopefully the keyboard's not too loud for people. And the next file we've got is the metric has too many lines. So let's start with a rake file. That looks like a nice easy win. So the output for the rake file is that we're using the old Ruby syntax, which is with the symbol indicator on the left, not on the right. So we'll go rake file there. We'll change that from the old format to the new format, which removes the fat arrow. And then if we rerun rubocop with just that one file, we see that issue's gone away. So here's rubocop, and that's our one change there. And if we rerun rubocop as a general thing, we should drop down to 11 offences. So now we'll have a look at the gem spec, which is here. And the rubocop specific issues for the gem spec file are: we have another here doc with the old style, and we have unordered dependencies, which are probably non-alphabetically ordered. Okay, so let's go into this file. The here doc is here, which is the same as before. It's a short indicator. It doesn't really tell you what it's indicating. It's just EOF for end of file. So we'll use the same kind of trick we did before in Vim. Nice replacement, and just call it DSC for description. That changes that around. And then in terms of dependency ordering, we have the dependency which is for runtime, which is just add dependency, and we have the development dependencies. And here you can see our spec comes before rake, so this is not alphabetically sorted. So that's a quick easy one. We just run through the sort command through Vim, and they now alphabetically sort. So if we then rerun against this file, we have no more offences. And we check the spec files to make sure we haven't inadvertently broken anything, which we haven't. We check the files that changed to make sure we're not doing anything odd, and then we commit that change. So clean up rubocop violations. That's it. So then if we run rubocop again without an argument, what's next on the list? So we have the main bulk of the puppet link code, which is in the libs plugin directory. Looks like that's most of it now. So let's open that up and see what we've got. So, okay, so this is the code here. It's a small function. As it's not real Ruby code, it's actually a Puppet extension. Some of the rules I wouldn't normally apply. So for example, the length of the function, the length of the method itself, I'm not too worried about it being over 10 lines, because this is a small discrete chunk of code. It's not a full-on program. So we're going to suppress one of those errors to start with. So the block has too many lines. Let's fix that one. So we'll edit the rubocop config file again. Rubocop. And we've got metrics, block length, and we'll set the max of that to be 30, which should be enough. And then if we note we've got 8 current offences on that file, if we rerun it, we should actually see oh, sorry, wrong file. We should now have 7 offences, which is good. That's dropped. Now, we also have a method's length is too long. So the actual method itself would also make that allowed to a little bit longer. So metrics block length, metrics method length, and we'll set that to be 30 as well. If you were actually building a full-on program with proper object orientation, you wouldn't have quite so much embedded in one bit. But trying to add plugin extensions which actually have more than one file per module start making things a little bit messy, so they're normally a little bit longer than you'd expect. So if we rerun this without the 6 offences. Now, next up we have style trailing comma in hash literal. Avoid the comma after the last time of a hash. So I don't agree with this. Surprise. When you're writing this code, if you ever wanted to, Rubocop wants the code to look like this, so you don't have a comma at the end because it's the last value. If you ever need to change this code and add a new one, so for example if we had to add character, when you add the new one in, you've got two things that will happen. One, most people will forget to change that line, so you end up going back into it twice. And two, if you do add that correctly the first time, when you run your diff, you're now getting a diff for both of those two lines, which, so let's just show you that again. So car, you'll see that the line above also appears in the diff because the comma's changed. So I always keep a comma on the last entry, so when I'm actually adding a new value, I only change the new line itself and you only see the new line in the diff, not everything. So we'll rerun Rubocop to find out what the name of that violation was, which is style trailing comma in hash literal. Then we'll go back into the config file and hash literal, and I'm pretty sure, because I'm not doing this a lot, it's enforced colon style table? No, enforced. Trailing comma in hash literal. Trailing comma in hash literal. Enforced style for multi. This is enforced style for multi. Isn't it? Style for multi. No, this will be lowercase l. Comma. And then we'll rerun it again and see if we drop from 6 offences to 5. If we didn't, I've got the option wrong. No, it worked. So when you first start using Rubocop, you'll feel bad about turning things off, but Rubocop is built to a set of defaults used by a large number of people. If you're writing code for other people to use, then you should normally fit to the standard because it's easier when people make their own submissions or PRs. If you're writing code for your own use, you can change it to be whatever you want in terms of syntax. It does mean that you end up carrying your Rubocop config around and you end up learning what these things off by heart, as you've just seen the sadness of me doing. So we will now look at, let's go for this one rather than dealing with hash layouts again for a moment. So style word array, use %w or %w for an array of words. Okay, so on line number 3, on character 17, as that line tells us, we have functions template inline. So Ruby lets us specify that an array, every element of an array is actually is a string essentially. So by taking out the extra syntax, it simplifies the values inside the array, which makes it a little bit nicer to read. You only have to look at the first part and it will tell you what kind of values are in the array and then not have to worry about all the individual syntactic parts. So if we change that and then rerun Rubocop, we're one down on the warnings, we're down to 4 offences. And then we'll run Spec just to make sure, because we made a couple of changes. Spec's still showing clean. Right, so back to Rubocop. So now let's look at the layout alignment. Align the keys of the hash literal if they span more than one line. So what this means is Rubocop would like the lines to look like that. I don't like that when I'm skimming through values. I find it easier to read if they're actually lined up on this side. So once again, we're going to override the defaults. So Rubocop, and the cop that we're going to change the value of is layout hash alignment. Just notice that these aren't alphabetical anymore. That's an exercise for the reader. So layout hash alignment, and it's enforced colon style. Yes, colon style, because then we specify table, because it then treats the two entries as columns rather than as normal widths of text. So that should make that go away. Okay. So that's most of the way there. And then what's left? We have the metrics ABC size is too long, and we have the layout line length is too long. And the line length being 127 characters isn't great. Let's have a look at line 5. Is there a good place to actually change this and make it under 120? Not really. So what we could do if we really wanted to, I don't know if this will actually make it shorter or not, but let's find out. If we did function token equals that, and then took away the conditional part there. That puts us on exactly the right line length, and then we can actually iterate over the array with a separate action. So function tokens dot each do function token, and that should continue as it was. So what we're doing now, instead of doing a select and running out over the returned value with the each, we're now taking the value of select, storing it in function tokens, and iterating over function tokens. You could turn this into a do end block over multiple lines, but it's not going to bring a huge amount of readability to it. So if we drop out, rerun rubocop over it, we've only got one thing left, which is the assignment branch conditional for the check. So this ABC, the assignment branch conditional, is basically the number of different paths inside a function. So we've got the select in here, we've got the essentially nested if statement for an OR, we've got an AND on the output of the first OR statement, we then do a loop over, we have a next conditional. There's quite a lot of logic in a very small function, but again, this isn't a normal method on a normal object, this is just a Puppet lint plugin. So we're going to override one last thing for the sake of tidiness, and we're going to change the metrics ABC size, rubocop, and the metrics ABC size, we're going to set that to be max. So what do we currently violate? Currently violate on 18.75, so if we set the max of that to 20, that should stop the code from getting any worse. Stops code getting any worse. So if we now run our specs one last time, for the specs pass, we'll do a git status to see what's changed, and then we'll do a commit with the rubocop changes in here and the Puppet lint module changes. Add both of those to the git. We run commit, and here you can see the things we've added in to rubocop, and you can see the changes we made to the Puppet function. Satisfy rubocop's watch for eye, and then we run one last rubocop run just to make sure we haven't missed anything, with no arguments. We want to see all the files, and that has an issue still, which is in the spec file. This is going to be because describe contain. So in Ruby, a spec is where you put your test cases for test unit testing, or unit testing, sorry. And describe is the top level that wraps most of it. And this is going to be a large function because it contains a number of different classes. So rather than refactor all this round, we're going to add an explicit override just for describe, because it's the one method that we don't mind being exceptionally long. So we can do rubocop one last time, and we'll add one more value in here, which will be, how do we do this? Metrics, was it block length we just saw? Apologies. Metrics block length, yes. But we're going to turn the maximum we have here, and we're going to actually have an excluded method. No, it takes an array, so it'll be excluded methods. And then if we put in describe, this allows the describe method to be even longer than the 30 we've already set it to, but won't allow any other thing to do. When you first start rubocoping a code base, this is one of the easiest ways of getting started. You go through, you add exceptions for the things you've got, and that way you can actually run it cleanly and spot any new violations without getting too tied up on the existing one. So here you'll see we're now clean. We'll double check the specs to make sure that's actually still running, and it is. We then commit the change to the rubocop config file, allow type to be longer than 30 lines. So then we'll just give a message. Okay, and we'll close that so it doesn't bother people with a little bit of technical OCD. And here we have all of the code base on. In order to make our rubocop checks pass with a nicer format, the diff itself isn't that huge. Most of the things it's picked up, such as the new style hash format, are actually for the better. Some of the layout ones and line lengths, they bring negligible value, but once you get used to working a certain way, you'll either turn them off or you'll be happy to comply to it. But it does at least make you think about the things it's complaining about. We reorder the dependencies there, rename some here docs to make them more useful, and that's mostly it. So with all of that done, we've got Git VL there. We'll use the hub command, which is a lovely command line interface to GitHub, and we'll do hub pull request, I think, no edit, no hyphen edit, and that will create, sorry. So first of all, we'll push this up to GitHub, so I've got a copy that's not on my local machine. Then we'll run the hub pull request no edit, and that will create a pull request on my repository with these changes in. So thank you for your time and attention. Hopefully that's shown you a little bit of how you can use Rubocop to make your own code a little bit better, or at least how to add a large number of overrides if you don't like the current format. Thank you and good night.